Next, a KQED Newsroom special on local business leaders changing the way we live, work, and connect with our communities.
We set out to build a resource that connected neighbors to the information that was most relevant to them.
A co-founder talks about helping neighbors tear down walls online. Also, an executive at Reddit talks about the challenges facing the popular online forum.
What we've tried to focus on is what is the core that makes Reddit powerful, and it's that conversation.
Plus, we hear how one startup is winning over consumers by ditching brand labels.
Millennials don't want to buy the products they grew up with because those brands were trust marks and they lost trust.
And the CEO's mission to make the food industry more green.
It's very personal and it's very high impact. We need to do something about our broken food system.
Hello, I'm Thuy Vu. Welcome to a special edition of KQED Newsroom. On this program, we're revisiting interviews from our archives with game-changing business leaders who are using the web to create and strengthen communities or pioneering new alternatives to staples in our fridge and pantry. We also asked them about the difficulties Silicon Valley has had with diversity, especially in key leadership positions. Our first conversation is with Prakash Janakiraman, the co-founder and chief architect of Nextdoor. The San Francisco company allows neighbors to create private networks online to share resources and information about their communities. According to the company, more than 180,000 neighborhoods from the U.S. to Europe are using Nextdoor to share hyperlocal content. And we want to disclose that KQED is a media partner of Nextdoor, using its service to deliver content to 4 Bay Area cities. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Thuy.
So how did the idea for Nextdoor come about?
So about 7 years ago, when we first started the company, we noticed a trend of social networks becoming more ubiquitous and mainstream. Facebook for your friends, Twitter to connect with people with whom you shared interests, and of course LinkedIn for your professional network. But we found it sort of strange that there was not a network where you could connect with the people right outside your front door. Your neighbors, the people that were most important to you in your local community. And so we set out to build a resource that connected neighbors to the information that was most relevant to them, and that's how Nextdoor came about.
So what are some of the most interesting interactions you've seen among neighbors on Nextdoor? Because, you know, I've used it. I've used it to ask for moving boxes when I was moving and then give it back to other people when I wasn't. I posted about them, and there are certainly a lot of posts I see about missing dogs and found dogs. But there was also someone who found an organ donor.
Yeah, that's right. We've seen everything from day-to-day kinds of recommendations that neighbors exchange with one another for babysitters, plumbers, auto mechanics. But we've also seen more critical use cases, especially around disasters where, for example, in Hurricane Harvey or the Napa wildfires or the Ventura County wildfires, we've seen neighbors banding together when the public infrastructure is under a lot of strain, especially 911 or first responders. And in the case of the liver donor, we did see that a neighbor put out a message saying, hey, one of our neighbors is in the hospital and looking for someone to donate an organ. And we actually found a liver donor within the neighborhood community, if you can imagine that. So a wide variety of different use cases.
Yeah. But, you know, there are lots of other entities that offer similar services, right? You could do Facebook groups. Craigslist has a function where you could form a group. There are homegrown forums. Why should people use Nextdoor? What sets you apart?
So I think there are two things that really set us apart. The first is when you look at networks like Facebook or Twitter or some of these other social networks, these are largely platforms for self-expression. They're a place for you to share photos, status updates, and really reveal a little bit more about yourself. Nextdoor is purely utility driven. People are coming to Nextdoor to use their neighbors as a resource to help them solve problems. And the second thing that I think is unique about Nextdoor is everyone that you're interacting with is a verified member of the neighborhood community. Each neighborhood is a geographically bounded entity on Nextdoor.
How do you verify that they actually live there?
We have a number of different ways that we verify. We can do mobile phone verification. We can do verification via postcard through the mail, where you redeem an invitation token that proves that you actually had to go to your mailbox and take it out. We have a number of different verification mechanisms. And once people are verified, that increases the level of trust that they're interacting with people who are actually in their neighborhood and facilitates a wide variety of more intimate types of exchanges than on these other platforms.
In this world where the internet is so ubiquitous, as you say, there is a concern that people aren't interacting face-to-face more. So Why is a neighborhood social network necessary? Why can't neighbors just go out and say, hey, hi, I'm your neighbor, let's chat face to face?
Yeah, I think we are combating a trend that has been happening in the United States, especially over the past 50 years, of a decline in community. In fact, one of the inspiring statistics that we saw when we started the company was that 29% of Americans claim to know very few of their neighbors, and 28% of Americans claim to know not a single neighbor by name. So you're talking about over half the population with very weak ties into their community. And so, as strange as it may seem in our kind of modern technological world, to use an app to facilitate these in-person interactions in the community, it actually is happening. We feel like our job is best performed when an online interaction on Nextdoor leads to an offline interaction. For example, your box story, when you needed boxes, ultimately you had to go interact with someone to exchange the boxes, and now you know a new neighbor in your community. And we see that all the time.
You've also had some growing pains, like many tech companies. There have been some problems with racial profiling. Residents were posting urgent alerts, for example, about people of color in their neighborhoods. What have you done to address this?
Yeah, first, we were definitely shocked to see our platform being used in this way, and especially as a Bay Area native, hearing about communities in Oakland where we first became aware of this happening was a real shock to the system. But we worked together with these communities to redesign our product in a way that I think is almost unprecedented in technology, where we changed the product. So a few things that were really important to us were, number one, to make people aware of the fact that they were using descriptive text without the context around what actually was suspicious about the activity. So we introduced friction into the posting process to force people to be more specific about the circumstances under which they were posting, not to be purely describing people on the characteristics of their race without some additional context as to what was suspicious. A person of color riding a bike in a neighborhood is not in and of itself worthy of putting out an urgent alert to all of your neighbors. But if they're casing the neighborhood or breaking into cars, now that's the descriptive text that accompanies it.
So then what kinds of posts, how do you regulate something like this, right? Because what about other kinds of posts that other people may find offensive, maybe concerning gender or religion? I mean, where do you draw the line?
Well, we expect through our community guidelines that neighborhood leads are responsible for sort of mandating the social decorum of the communities in which we land this product. So, understanding that we are in 180,000 different neighborhoods across the country, the product takes on a lot of the identity of the communities in which you land it. And so there are, in some cases, local specific issues that need to be discussed, but need to be done with civil discourse in mind. And so our community guidelines, our neighborhood leads, and then we have a support team back at HQ that helps when those neighborhood leads feel like they're a little bit beyond their capability to handle things. But we try and self-moderate. And in 10 seconds, are you making any money yet? We are starting to earn revenue through sponsored posts, native feeds, native advertising in the feed and in our emails, and now with realtors as well. Nextdoor co-founder Prakash Janakiraman, thank you so much. Thank you. Turning now from connecting neighborhoods to bringing together millions of people online. Imagine a free website where you can find more than 100,000 discussion forums on pretty much any topic imaginable. Welcome to Reddit. Since its launch in 2005, Reddit has become the fourth most popular website in the U.S. Each month, hundreds of millions of visitors comment on and post links to various topics known as subreddits. But with that growth comes challenges. Like Facebook, Twitter, and other social media, Reddit is grappling with how to protect free speech while fighting hate speech and online bullying. Here now to talk about all of this is the General Counsel and Vice President of Reddit, Melissa Tidwell. Melissa, nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So Reddit is one of the most popular websites, not only in the U.S., but in the world. Yet it doesn't have the same name recognition as, say, YouTube or Facebook. Why do you think that is?
I think it's a couple of things. When I started the company in 2015, we were about 60 people, and now we're about 400. And so I think it's a lot of growth, but in comparison to sort of our user growth, we're an incredibly small company. And so in terms of users sort of being out there and the brand perception, some users want to, are doing interesting things for the world, and some users want to maintain their privacy and have that.
how do you balance Reddit users' right to free speech while monitoring and even shutting down hate speech?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're having a great conversation today on those questions. I think for Reddit, we are focusing on a couple of things. As I said, part of our growth is growing the company and growing the functions that we need to have for the company to be successful. So for us, that means we have an actual policy team now that thinks about these things from a big picture perspective. We have a trust and safety team, which are the enforcers, and that ensure that as we have policies, they can enforce at scale. We have the anti-evil engineering team, which are
That's what they're called, anti-evil engineering team?
Our current name. And so, the team that they help us build the tools.
Do you think that social media sites have an obligation to curb hateful content, including conspiracy theories?
It's a great question. I think for us as a company, what we are focused on is ensuring that the conversation is healthy. I think we're at a time where it's important to have hard conversations, and it's important that as a platform we recognize that and facilitate it. It's not okay to allow a small number of voices to sort of overshout sort of what's happening, and that's a hard thing to manage, right? What we've tried to focus on is what is the core that makes Reddit powerful, and it's that conversation. It's if there's an article posted about the Washington Nationals and whether or not they've made the playoffs, is it people shouting over each other and yelling about the players, or is it people talking about what was awful about them not making it and what they should do about it? We are trying to encourage those types of behaviors, and we try and do that in different ways. Sometimes that's with our community management team to reach out to the moderators to say, hey, your conversation has gone off the rails. Get your users back on track, right? Focus on what the topic of your community is.
Or else what?
Or else we'll take action.
And how do Reddit users differ from users of Facebook, Twitter, or other social media?
I would say, one of the big lessons for me was the importance of thinking about the Reddit community, right? Coming from Google to Reddit, we do posts on a very consistent basis where we engage with our users, and they're very honest. They give we're almost like politicians. They give us real-time feedback on what they think we're doing right and what they think we're doing wrong.
So I think anonymous too.
They're anonymous. They're pseudo-anonymous. So it's just a username and password that's required to sort of create an account and take action.
So on the one hand, that could be good, because if you're talking about sensitive topics, like maybe an eating disorder or something,
Absolutely,
you don't want your identity known. But does staying anonymous also make it easier to bully someone or trolling?
Perhaps it does, but I think it also allows people to sort of stand up, right? I think on other real name platforms, there's a risk of how are your friends going to react to what you're saying, right? And I think part of the beauty, we have a community called Ask a Trump Supporter, which is, I think, a great community of people who are saying, listen, I don't agree with everything he says, but I'm here to be a rational voice as to, from a policy perspective, what's actually happening.
What about fake accounts? Facebook has come under fire for allowing fake accounts to influence elections or to fan political tensions. Are fake accounts a problem for you as well, and what do you do about it?
It's a great question. For us as a company, we have voting on our platform, upvoting and downvoting. One of our rules is that there's not allowed to be vote manipulation. So from our very early days, we have focused on the integrity of the vote. And that means for us looking whether the users are bots or actual real users, ensuring that we're fighting spam and dealing with those issues. At the same time, there are good bots, right? There are communities who've created bots that will warn you at the beginning of posting the rules of that community, right? So politics as a community will say, we require civil discussion. That is an automated bot, something that reminds the users. So I think it's important for us to remember that there are good bots and things that can be helpful to users, and there are bad bots.
Let's talk about Silicon Valley's diversity gap as well. Prior to Reddit, you spent 8 years as an attorney at Google, so you've been able to sort of break through the ranks, but you're a rarity. Studies show, government figures show that in tech companies, the executive level is 84% white. It's nearly 70% men. What can you do to change that and move more women and people of color into positions of tech leadership?
It's definitely a problem in tech, and I think tech is starting to realize that. As a Black female executive, one of the very few, I think a couple of things are really important. Number one, it's important that you have the conversation at the executive level. So, I started the company. Steve Huffman, who's our CEO, came, I think, probably a month or two after I did. And it's a conversation that we've had a very open and honest conversation about diversity and the importance of it.
So what do you do about it?
You have to acknowledge the issue and you take steps to address it. I think for us as an executive team, our executive team reflects diversity, and therefore our reports reflect diversity. It's not shocking that as a minority executive, I then have 3 out of 4 women who are my leads. It's not shocking that the diversity of my own team is much more intuitive because I'm looking for different things. I'm looking for different perspectives. And we try and talk about that as a company as to how other teams can sort of think differently. That's not, you can't just search on LinkedIn. You can't just look for, I need someone who has exactly done this at this type of company. Yeah. You have to think outside the box and do it in different ways. And so I think it's a problem that's never ending and something that you just have to continually work at.
One step at a time. Yeah. Melissa Tidwell, General Counsel at Reddit, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Moving on now from the way we connect to the way we shop. Brandless is an e-commerce startup based in San Francisco. The so-called anti-brand got its start in 2017 with a mission to offer quality products at a very low cost. Their inventory includes a broad range of everyday necessities, from food to beauty products to office supplies, each with a price tag of $3. KQED's Marisa Lago sat down with the CEO of Brandless, Tina Sharkey.
Tina, thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me.
So everything at Brandless is $3, which is very low. Tell me what kind of products we're talking about.
The whole idea at Brandless was to create a simple, organized, edited assortment of the things that you love, from chips to crackers to cookies, you name it. And then in the essentials, so organic spices or organic all-purpose flours and baking mixes, as well as personal care, so fluoride-free toothpaste, essential oil mouthwash.
Was there a particular moment that sort of drove you to create this brand? You've been in business for a while and done a lot of other things that are pretty different from this.
Yeah, I would say, what's interesting is it all started with my co-founder. Ido Leffler and I decided that we actually wanted to change the world together in our own small, humble way. And we were both doing lots of other things at the time, but we said, let's carve out the time and the space to actually figure out what's broken and what we want to fix. I came from building communities. I came from building commerce and media and direct consumer experiences, all digital. And he came from creating consumer packaged goods products. Okay. So I said, what if we were to fuse it and build a community that's based on something that's bigger than anything that we sell? This whole idea that we could democratize access to better things at fair prices for everyone. And so we set off to do that.
So how are millennial customers different from maybe their parents?
It's so interesting about the millennial consumer, because think of them as first-time head of household, right? They're now, either they're setting up their college dorm room, or they are setting up their first apartment, or they're having babies. Millennial moms are going to be the largest segment of moms. They probably already are, and if they're not, they will be in 2 seconds. 78% of millennials have said they don't want to buy the products that they grew up with or that their parents use.
That's so interesting to me, because I feel like product branding is so ingrained in us, right?
I know, but it's changing, because today the brands of yesterday don't represent the value system. And I think it's 67% of Americans say, not just millennials, they want to shop from a company that represents their values. And so millennials don't want to buy the products they grew up with, because those brands were trust marks and they lost trust. So people are turning over their taste. It's millennials, but it's also perennials, people who are changing their habits, changing their consumption patterns, and changing the brands that they want to reach for.
You call yourself a social capitalist. I mean, how important is it from a business perspective too to have a company that's sort of aimed at the broader good? That's not just, I know you guys give money to programs for feeding folks when you buy something.
So we partner with Feeding America. There's 41 million people in this country that go hungry every day. And Feeding America is the largest hunger relief organization in this country with the broadest network of food banks. When you check out at Brandless, we will purchase a meal through Feeding America in your honor, because we believe that the doing in life is what matters, and we don't wait for Giving Tuesday. Every time you can do a tangible act of kindness, it's just kind of how Brandless rolls. So our community is always doing things. And in fact, as we celebrated our first anniversary, we'd already given away over 1.6 million meals.
Wow. So you have a lot of experience as an entrepreneur and an executive. You co-founded iVillage, which at the time was the largest online community for women. You were president of Baby Center, excuse me. How's the business landscape changed as a woman in tech and business broadly?
It's funny, but I never really identified as a woman or a man in terms of who I was as a leader. I'm Tina. And I have my experience, I have my passions. I'm also a mom, I'm also a friend, I'm also a sister, I'm lots of things. But when I show up at work, I'm a leader who's there to build an extraordinary business, and I don't think of it as it's a female-run business. It's a business that fully expresses the commitment and passion of the people that come to work for us and the movement that we're building. And so I think the landscape has changed in that having that real seat at the table is something that's very, very important, because I represent not only my own business experience, but also my personal experience. And my, 89% of the purchasing in this country is done by women. Right. So the idea that women wouldn't have a seat at the table for any consumer business, let alone any business to begin with, is kind of crazy. But I don't think about it as, oh, I'm a woman, therefore. I think I'm Tina, and this is my experience, and I don't want to be labeled or given an advantage other than my skills, my passion, and what I'm building and executing.
So what would be your biggest piece of advice for aspiring entrepreneurs?
I would say always be your authentic self, because authenticity scales. Bring smarter people around you that complement your skill set and complement what you can bring to the table. Always make room in diversity and inclusion. It's not just about color or race or ethnicity. It might be about style. It might be about approach. And so not everybody has the same approach to things. Right. But as an entrepreneur, part of your job is to sort of convene a diverse set of voices, a diverse set of experience, and a diverse set of opinions, and then surround yourself with people who actually want to stay with you and your movement for the long game.
Fabulous. Well, Tina Sharkey, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Our next CEO created Method, a line of environmentally friendly cleaning products. Adam Lowry sold Method in 2012 and embarked on a new mission to reduce the planet's carbon footprint. His new company is Ripple Foods, located in Emeryville. Its flagship product is a non-dairy milk made from peas. That's right, peas. All right, so milk made from peas.
Yeah,
Why
that's
peas?
Right. Pea milk, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, peas are high in protein, and the situation right now is most alternatives to dairy products are actually pretty bad dairy alternatives. They don't have any protein in them or have very little, and most people agree that they're kind of thin and watery. So by making milk out of peas, we were able to make something really high in protein, but really creamy and delicious. And at the end of the day, that's the way we're going to get more people to eat healthier, more nutritious, and more sustainable foods.
Well, you were a chemical engineer by training. You were a climate scientist at one point. Where did the inspiration for this company come from? Does your environmental training come into it?
Yeah, partially. I think a big part of this story also is my co-founder, Neil Renninger, who's a PhD biochemist. He's the real scientist between the two of us. And he created a way to get totally pure protein out of any plant source. And when you do that, it's tasteless. Many people don't know that proteins have no flavor. So if you get really pure protein from plants, you can make foods out of it that are really delicious. And then they are foods that a lot more people will buy and enjoy.
And I think you were also inspired by this philosophy of trying to cut down on the carbon footprint, right? Mm-hmm. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that I do have a background as a climate scientist. That was a long time ago, and that was a big part of the inspiration for my first business, Method, trying to use a business to create social and environmental impact. Now, fortunately, that's become a much more mainstream idea now. Food is even more personal and has even more impacts on our environment and on our health, of course, than cleaning products. And so that was my that's why I really wanted to get into food. It's because it's very personal and it's very high impact. We need to do something about our broken food system, and we need to do it through foods that are really delicious that people enjoy.
And that don't cause a lot of carbon output, for example, because dairy products and meat products contribute to the carbon footprint.
Yeah, exactly. So dairy is about a quarter of our food carbon footprint, and food's about 30% of our human carbon footprint. That means dairy is about 8% of humanity's carbon footprint. And most of the alternatives are not much better. You know, almond milk, for example, takes a lot of water.
Mm. And I know that this was also the inspiration behind your Method cleaning products, your prior company. You started it with your college buddy, Eric Ryan. And in the beginning, you were actually making different method formulas in your bathtub.
That is correct. Yeah, it was sort of the most ironic place you could think of a cleaning products company being born, which is the bachelor pad of 5 guys in their mid-20s.
But probably not so clean bachelor pad.
It was exactly as clean as you would think it would be. And yeah, we made the product there, actually used beer pitchers and things like that initially, and we were selling it door to door to grocery stores. But now Method's actually the largest green cleaning company in the world.
Is it really? Mm-hmm. That's a great Silicon Valley story, isn't it? But Silicon Valley has come a long way. It makes amazing products that billions of people use around the world. But there's also been criticism that Silicon Valley companies don't do enough to be good corporate citizens. For example, on things like housing. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think in today's environment, you have to have a civic identity that has a sense of purpose as a company. It's no longer appropriate for a company to just sit on the sidelines. Now, what I don't mean is that a company has to be overtly political. There is a difference between politics and policy. Mm-hmm. And I think that businesses have a responsibility to put forward ideas about how they can make the world a better place, whether that be environmental, whether that be social, whatever the issue may be. And I think that it's...
Do you think Silicon Valley has done enough on that front?
Well, clearly there are some places where Silicon Valley, has some ways to go. I mean, it's the hotbed of innovation. There's a spirit of creativity here that's absolutely fantastic. And I think we've seen some examples where we need to do better as an overall business community in this area. And so I think that's where examining the impacts that a business can have socially and environmentally is really critical, and then being conscious and deliberate about trying to do better in those areas.
Yeah. And just real quickly, since we're on the topic of corporate social responsibility, this week we saw a number of companies step forward on the gun control debate. United and Delta cutting their discounts for NRA members, for example. Walmart and Dick's Sporting Goods changing their gun sales policies. How do you feel about companies taking stands on controversial issues?
Yeah, I think it's important for companies to have a point of view and to share that point of view. And as I said, it can be a little bit of a tricky line when it starts to toe the line into politics and the sausage making of politics. But I don't think it's appropriate anymore to not be involved. I think that trust in societal institutions, trust in business is really at an all-time low, and we need to rebuild that by saying, hey, this is what we stand for, this is what we think is right and wrong, and live that.
Okay. Adam Lowry, co-founder and CEO of Ripple Foods, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And that will do it for us. For more of our coverage, go to kqed.org/newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. Thank you for joining us.